Hi, I'm Bob Haber, and today on the HaberBrook farm, I'll explain why I insulate my beehives all year round. Most beekeepers today raise their bees in Langstroth hives, invented by Lorenzo Langstroth in 1852, and which revolutionized beekeeping, allowing people like me to become backyard beekeepers. They're simple, they're effective, but they don't mimic nature. Raising bees and making honey are both very temperature-dependent processes. So in nature, bees will instinctively build a hive in a location that's well insulated, and thus easier to maintain a consistent temperature. Like a hollow tree. A typical tree with a wall thickness of 6 to 8 inches will have an R value, or insulation value, of between 6 and 8. For comparison, a Langstroth hive with a wall thickness of 3/4 of an inch has an R value of less than 1. An R value of less than 1 is like a tent. At night, the temperature drops very quickly. But as soon as the sun hits, it becomes unbearably hot. Why? No insulation. Northern beekeepers like myself need to help get our colonies through some very cold winters. So a common practice is to insulate our hive with a bee cozy or some other kind of wrap. There's not much controversy about helping a hive keep warm in the winter. The insulation is then typically removed in the spring. But why leave your hive uninsulated in the summer? It's a common misconception that insulation makes your hive warmer, and therefore leaving insulation on would keep your hive too hot. Insulation neither warms nor cools anything. Insulation simply slows down the movement of heat from one side of the insulation to the other. Your winter coat doesn't make you warm. It traps your body heat and keeps you warm. The insulation in your refrigerator doesn't make food cold. It helps keep food cold. The bee's job is to make honey. Our job is to make the bee's job easier. So anything we can do to make it easier for the bees to maintain proper internal temperature in the hive will make the hive more productive. The ideal temperature inside the hive is between 92 and 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And bees are some of nature's most amazing HVAC specialists and are able to maintain that very narrow temperature range regardless of the outside temperature. They warm the hive when it's too cool, they cool the hive when it's too warm. They truly are amazing creatures. But exactly how much control do the bees have? I like to know what's going on in my hives at all times. So I monitor my hive weight and temperature with scales and temperature probes made by broodminder.com. What I've learned is fascinating. During a 5-day period this July, I compared the outside temperature to the inside temperature in one of my hives. This section of the graph highlights the ideal temperature zone between 92 and 98 degrees. You can see the outside temperature varied from a low of 68 degrees to a high of 95 degrees. During this same period, the temperature in the lower brood box was kept at almost exactly 95 degrees, regardless of the outside temperature. The temperature in the upper brood box varied a bit more, but was still maintained within the ideal zone. This demonstrates the remarkable ability of the bees to control the temperature within the hive, involving both ventilation and bearding. Quite extraordinary. Keeping the hive cool on a hot summer day is particularly difficult because each bee actually generates heat. So if the hive is not able to lower its internal temperature adequately just using airflow, there's only one other option. All beekeepers are familiar with bearding, when thousands of bees congregate on the outside of a hive on a hot day. It's felt to be a natural process. But is it? Bees are by nature busy. They don't get time off. What are all those bees doing when they're on the outside of the hive? Absolutely nothing. They're not foraging for nectar or for pollen. They're not taking care of larvae or the queen. They're not making comb. They're not turning nectar into honey. They're doing absolutely nothing. They've simply all been sent outside the hive so the hive can cool off. And while they're on the outside of the hive is less productive. So logic told me, treat my beehive, the bee's home, the same way I treat my own home. Keep it insulated year-round. In my home, insulation makes the air conditioner work less hard in the summer and the furnace work less hard in the winter. The same should be true for a beehive, except the bees are the heating and the cooling units. To test this theory, I exchanged my bee suit for a lab coat, and I conducted an experiment. I created 2 simulated hives. Into each box I installed 8 fully drawn out frames, but no honey and no bees. One is insulated, one is not. I then installed temperature probes from each of my active hives, and I sealed the hives up so no bees would get in. I left them in place here next to my regular hives for several days, and it's very interesting to see what happens to the temperature inside these boxes. This graph shows that over a 5-day period, the outside temperature varied from a low of about 60 degrees to a slowly increasing high of about 88 degrees. Inside the non-insulated hive, the temperature varied widely from a low of 63 to a high of 103 degrees, while the temperature in the insulated hive varied from a low of 65 to a high of 98 degrees. Notably, on all days, the insulated hive stayed about 5 degrees cooler than the non-insulated hive and never exceeded the maximum desired brood temperature. The non-insulated hive reached and exceeded the maximum temperature range, and if there had been bees inside this hive, they would have been sent outside to beard. 5 degrees may not seem like much, but it takes a tremendous amount of energy to lower the temperature just 1 degree. This experiment demonstrated conclusively that an insulated hive in the sun will actually be cooler than a non-insulated hive. So my conclusion was that beehives should indeed be insulated year-round to make it easier for the bees to maintain the ideal internal temperature and maintain high productivity. And I insulated my hives with inexpensive materials that I bought from Home Depot. If I've made you a believer, then look for an upcoming video where I'll show you how I insulate my hives. In the meantime, happy beekeeping.